Hi there, everyone. I'm Ani Anderson from the Somatic Coaching Academy. I'm joined by Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Ani, how are you?
I'm good. Brian's our Director of Education. Mr. Brian, as many people call you, Brian
Mhm.
Trazaskos, as Siri calls you, Brian Traskos. So today we're talking about achieving mental well-being with core centering principles. We've been talking about this for a few days, Brian. So why don't you give us a little recap on what we've been talking about?
So far, we have talked about the idea of the core centering or the interconnectedness around groups, around teams, around leaders, um, around people, right? So we're all people, and there's a sense of connectedness amongst all of us. So what connects us to us, sort of thing, and it's this idea of centeredness. And what we know is that if centeredness is the key, the hub of the wheel of leadership, and that includes self-leadership, then how do we go about doing that? How do we go about consciously becoming centered? And so we're discussing the four primary elements in consciously becoming centered. And so we have talked about an element of utilizing self massage to help us become centered. We're talking about these as far as doorways or portals. You can think about it like a compass if you wanted to, or the spokes on a wheel. I don't know. Think about however you want to think about these things. But there are four basic components. I'd like to think about them in terms of like a combination lock.
Oh, yeah, I love
If you
actually that
open up a
metaphor.
combination, if you can open up a lock, you've got to know what numbers on the combination and what order to put them in order to effectively open up the lock. So if we want to open up our own sense of centeredness, then we've talked about self-massage. Yesterday, we spoke about movement. We spoke about specifically moving in certain ways. We kept using the word mindfully moving, and mindfulness in its own right has components within it. But really, what we're talking about is moving in certain ways will help us to further unlock our capacity to become and feel centered.
Awesome. That was really great recap. I was thinking as you were talking about how one of the values in our company is lightheartedness. So often you will find us, cracking a little joke or you know, just laughing. We love to do that when we're presenting on stages, yeah. We'll
That
say,
kind
"Oh, it's time for a nerd alert," and put our glasses on or something. So lightheartedness is a value in our company. And one of the reasons why we're able to achieve that as individuals and as a culture is because of core centeredness. So a lot of the whether it's private or it's organizational clients that we work with are looking to help their cultures also feel lighter, and they'll describe that in a lot of different ways or use a different word around it. Some people will say magical, or they'll say we want to have, there's all kinds of words that people use.
of better resilience, right? We want
And
people to be
so
more resilient, more
vitality,
reactive, more friendly, more
friendly.
accepting, like all kinds of things.
Thank you for filling in my blank there. So exactly. So there's lots of different ways to describe that, but the way that you get that lighter culture. Oh, I just gave the whole thing away right there.
Mm.
Did anybody catch that? I wonder. The way that you have a lighter culture is to do things, tools, methods that help you to come from a place of core centeredness, even in the midst of stress-inducing world and overwhelm. And all of us have stuff going on right now, right? And so there are these portals, like you were saying. We've talked about a number of them, and the one that we're talking about today is, if you're watching, can you guess? Because I just gave it away. Breath. We're talking about breath today.
Talking about, yeah, the idea of conscious breathing. Again, we'll go back to it, breathing in certain ways. I don't want to I'm sorry, I cut you off, Ani.
No, I was just I was gonna give away something else here about the breath real quick, but go ahead and say it, because it's important to say this, I think, over and over. Breathing in certain ways, conscious
Mm-hmm.
breathing, right? Because we're breathing all the time.
Yeah, and some people say that. They're like, I know how to breathe. I breathe all the time. And that is true that if you're alive, you're probably breathing. And if you're not alive, you're probably not breathing anymore. But it's how we breathe, that just like how we move. And we can even say how we touch our bodies, right? In terms of, it's how we do these things that will either accentuate core centeredness or actually take us farther away from it. And so it's how we do, and it's more than just about breathing alone, by the way, too. Does that mean that someone can say, well, I do breath practices during the day? Well, that's awesome. That's so good. Yes. And if you also work in the other aspects of the core centering practices themselves, you can enrich the effectiveness of the breath practices themselves for whatever reason that you're doing them. So they all work together, but it's really about that we're breathing in certain ways. We're doing it consciously in a certain way in order to then create a certain result.
You're reminding me of when I cook. So our kids were cooking with your mother, and they noticed that my children
Cooking with a Nona.
Cooking with Nona. That's a story for another day. Nona recognized that my kids were not measuring ingredients. And one of the reasons is because I have a tendency not to measure ingredients. Now, what the kids don't see is that I measure when it's really important. But let's just face it, Brian, sometimes I will make something and it doesn't come out because I didn't measure the ingredients. So, one time our daughter Charlotte made a pie, and she mistook the tablespoon or teaspoon of salt for a half a cup of salt. Did you actually taste that pie? I mean, I did. Did you?
I did. It was rough.
My taste buds can still remember how hard that was. They were like, that was the roughest day. Anyway.
Especially because you're looking at this beautiful pie and you're like, oh my God, it's gorgeous. And you just want to dig into it. So you taste it.
She did such an amazing job, but she miscalculated. She mismeasured the salt. And it reminds me a little bit of what we're talking about here, because doing conscious body-mind strategies or somatic strategies, it's really helpful to do them in a certain way. Almost like when you follow a recipe, like doing it in a certain way, not just throwing it in in the apple pie. So when we talk about breath work, there are certain ways, and of course, in a short few minute live, it's not like we can describe all those. Those are some things that we do in our programming. What we want to talk about today is the importance of breath. And maybe you'll give us just a little taster, Brian, so that we can experience state change. So we were talking yesterday about state change and how tools can help us to change states, just like a door is a place we walk through to get to another room. So we want to go from, say, an overwhelmed state, or, I'm moving too fast, or I'm not as productive or as focused as I want to be, into another state. So in order to get to that other state, we have to go through a room. Now, I didn't make this one up, but one of our teachers years ago used to say that the breath is the handle. I just love that so much. So to think about the breath being the handle of the door, like that is what helps us open the door to get to state change. That's so cool.
Yeah. And it is so true. And the physiology of breath is really amazing. But really just what you're talking about, one key thing. So we've been talking all along about neurochemicals, right? Biochemicals in our bodies, and the connectedness between biochemicals and then state change, thought states, emotional states, attitudinal states, those sorts of things. And the cool thing about the breath is that there's a direct line between sensors in our sinuses to our hypothalamus in our brain. Like a highway conduit from the sensors in our sinuses to the hypothalamus in our brain. Of course, the hypothalamus is one of the key players to activate the stress response. Or the relaxation response, however you want to talk about that. So again, depending on how we're breathing alone, will instantaneously activate state changes and change neurohormone profiles in our bodies, which will then change everything that's going on in there. So it can move us very quickly away from centeredness or towards centeredness. While I say it that simply, it kind of is that simple, and it's also richer and deeper than that as well, especially when you understand that it's not the only tool that you can use. And when you combine it with other ingredients, it gets even better, right? It actually makes it even not only a more rapid state change, but a more sustainable state change as well by doing breath tools.
Right. The sustainability is so important because we want these things to last, not just for 30 seconds, but we want to be able to go into meetings or client engagements or whatever it is that we're doing, sessions with people, and be able to help them to help ourselves to change states. We want to be able to help our clients and our patients and to the people that we serve to change states so that they can leave and go do things in their lives, and really, then that's what really creates sustainable behavioral change.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Go ahead.
go ahead. Did you have something to say?
Well, I was just going to just continue adding on to this and say that our breath is also one of these key things that connects us. So I think 2 or 3 days ago, I talked about the idea of coherence amongst people and groups, that when a group is in a mission-driven scenario together, like a surgical team, and their EKGs come online, their brain waves come online together, right? They all start to sync up together. So breath is one of these key features of people and groups syncing together. So breath is actually a connection. And if you don't believe that, think about COVID,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, how is the coronavirus transmitted? Through our breath. And look how rapidly it's so at least right now, 2 million people a day are contracting. So that's how powerful the breath is. It literally is the connection point between all humans and all animals and everything else on the planet.
You're right. I wasn't thinking about it in terms of that. So when you said that, it took me off guard from my train of thought. I was also thinking about how we can kind of sneakily affect, is that a word? The people who we're with. Like if you're in a client engagement or a session or something, I mean, just check it out sometime. Take a deep breath. And the likelihood that the other person that you're around is going to take a deep breath because you took a deep breath. Look at yawning.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
say yawning is contagious,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
it's actually a really kind of sneaky cool way to be able to inspire.
Yeah. Again.
I
Yeah.
know you're usually the one with the puns, but I
Mhm.
had one today. Inspire others to change their state as well.
Mhm.
So enough with my funny business today. Brian, will you show us a really quick taster of a breath practice that we can experience a little bit before and after? So maybe we'll like check in before and check in after and see what we feel like.
Sure. I mean, I think just that ease. A lot of people have done this one before, but you may not have done it yet today, right? So a simple one is just a simple essential and a simple essential breath. So a simple essential kind of 2-part breath is we're breathing in and we're breathing back out again. But let's do this in a certain way. So here's the certain way. So feel your feet on the ground.
Okay, hang on. Before you do anything in a certain way, just on a scale of 0 to 10 right now, check in your body and see, let's just say how tense you feel. Okay, so just give yourself a number from 0 to 10. How tense do you feel right now?
Mhm.
I'm going to do myself. You do you, Ryan.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, now go ahead.
All right, now do the certain way. Okay, so feel your feet on the ground and kind of just stamp your feet a little bit so you feel your feet connected down to the ground. Feel your butt on the chair, so sink down into the chair. Okay. And then, look, it already started.
Right?
Let go of a breath. Let go of a breath. Allow the top of your head to feel connected up to the sky so you feel nice and long in your spine. Eyes open or eyes closed, totally up to you. Just notice the breath flow in. Notice wherever it flows. It flows into your chest, your abdomen, your toes, your feet, your ears. It doesn't matter. Just let the breath come in. And then let the breath go out. In and out through the nose if possible. If possible. If not, go ahead and include the mouth as you like. Just let the breath come in again. And as breath comes in, feel it flow in through your nose or in through the back of your throat. And as you exhale, feel it flow back out through your nostrils, your sinuses, or through your mouth. Notice the breath come in again. And this time as we breathe out just a little more. I'll breathe through my mouth to demonstrate. Breathe out just a little more than you ordinarily would. And then let the breath come back in. And then again, breathe out just a little bit more than you ordinarily would. And then let the breath just, whatever it wants to do, come back in. Just a few more times. And each of these exhales, make your exhale just a little more each time, just nudging it. And as the breath flows back in, just let it come in. Release any resistance to it at all. Just let it flow and fill as much as it can. Exhale out just a little bit more. Slow, smooth, and deep. And then let it flow in as much as it wants to. And just one more time. And let it come back in. And then relax. So I could do that for another few days, but there was about a minute or so.
So check in, and on a scale of 0 to 10, how tense do you feel now? And did that number change? Did it change for you, Brian?
Oh, most definitely. I feel much more centered actually in the core of my body and my abdomen. I definitely came down a couple of points.
Yeah, I did too. And centered is a good word to use, or grounded. And I feel more embodied in my lower body, whereas before we did it, I felt more heady.
Yep.
And actually, I feel like my voice got deeper. I think I was probably talking like Mickey Mouse before. Thank you. That really felt wonderful. So these are some of the methods that we teach in the core centering practitioner training, and not just so that you can do them, but so that you can do them with the people that you serve. I mean, what a gift to be able to teach somebody something as simple as that, Brian. Do that with somebody, then they can take that on their way. So there's a link in the comments below to look at how you can join the core centering program with us. It's coming up in a few weeks. If you have any questions, comments about the program, please put them in the comments. We'll get to you. And if you have any questions, comments, or insights about that experience, that was a really wonderful experience, Brian. Thank you so much for leading us through that. We would love to hear about that as well, because whatever, we don't know what your experience was, but whatever it was matters. And we want to know. Also, I can't help it. It's always something I want to point out, how nobody needs to know that you did that. Like somebody could take that exact practice and you could do it anytime, even in the middle of having a conversation with someone else. And nobody needs to know. You don't need to stand on your head or do anything like that. It's really so practical. It makes me very happy how practical it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for joining us today. Remember, tomorrow is our last. So if you're watching live, tomorrow is our last principle. So join us for that live. And if you're watching the recording, lucky you can go click on it right now. So we'll see you real soon, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.